Forget retro gaming goodness.
Welcome to the first episode of Player One Memories, a nostalgic look back at the era of classic arcade gaming. So let's jump back to 1990, which was a global melting pot pop culture-wise. We had classic movies like The Hunt for Red October, with Sean Connery slurring his way through another classic movie.
A little revolution now and then is a healthy thing, don't you think?
Goodfellas with its instantly quotable dialogue.
I'm funny how? I mean funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Ass Ass Baby was a #1 song by Vanilla Ice, which made you feel like the apocalypse was closer than you thought. And the bearded wonder himself, Chuck Norris, became the first Westerner to be awarded a black belt grandmaster in Taekwondo. But in the arcades, it felt like the second wave was flooding onto us, as arcades musically and graphically were advancing in leaps and bounds. It was a wonderful time to navigate those dingy, loud, claustrophobic levels of the big arcades, which brings us to today's game, Alien Storm by Sega, released in 1990. This game was released about 1 year after 1989's massive arcade hit Golden Axe, and sticks to that formula pretty closely while adding some of its own fun touches to the gameplay. Walking into any arcade back then was mesmerizing, with each game's audio jacked up and trying to grab your attention to lure you in. I first played this at a small arcade in Queensborough, South Africa, where they had about a 20 machine setup at the base of an old apartment block called Melbourne Heights, which is also incidentally where me and my brother and some friends threw a full-size mannequin off the top of that building to simulate and record the whole thing for our home video remake of Die Hard.
I just trashed one of your friends. You know what I am? I'm your worst nightmare.
Epic 1990. And back to Alien Storm, which was a side-scrolling beat-em-up, but with weapons, and it also featured side-scroller run-and-gun levels, big old boss battles, and some awesome first-person bonus stages, like something out of Sega's own Shinobi, but with just big Ghostbusters-style proton blasting action. Overall, there were 6 levels to beat up, run, and blast your way through, and being an arcade obviously meant you could play it in either 2 or even 3-player mode, selecting one of the 3 available characters, Karen, Garth, or Scooter, who all obviously had their own strengths and weaknesses. And if Golden Axe taught us anything, then having a cool screen-destroying smart bomb is always a plus. You can also gain back energy in a similar way by blasting these floating heads of certain aliens to gain energy back. It's almost like kicking those cheeky midgets in Golden Axe. Your goal in the game is to take your Alien Busters team and stop the alien invasion by taking on missions leading to massive UFOs, big old boss battles before the final encounter. It was just a well-crafted game, from the excellent cutscenes between missions, awesome sound effects, and beautiful 2D animation with tons of detail. It was a cut above the rest. It was ported to a number of home systems at the time as well, including the Sega Master System and the Commodore 64 version, which I played quite a bit and enjoyed, but the Sega Mega Drive Genesis version is the one to play for sure. It's not a level-to-level clone, but adds more of its own stuff to the arcade while remixing it, and is well worth playing as a home version. This is a fun, unique game that Sega still haven't made a sequel to for whatever reason, but is a great arcade classic that is worth tracking out and giving a spin. 1982 saw the birth of one of my favorite video game companies, Electronic Arts. With hit after hit on the old 8 and 16 bits, it's a shame all they've been doing for the last couple decades is release the same game over and over and over and over and over and over. We also saw the death of comedian John Belushi from a cocaine overdose, which does explain his completely manic movie performances and TV appearances. Rest in peace, you crazy maniac. And on the pop culture front, we got introduced to Michael Knight in Knight Rider, a ridiculous TV show about a dude in his talking car that solved crimes. It was even cheesy by 80s standards, but man did I not miss a single episode. The Hoff rocks.
Permit denied.
And let's go on to today's game, which is Moon Patrol, released in the arcades by RM in 1982. They would go on to make such classic gems as Zippy Race, R-Top, and In the Hunt. The game was designed by Takashi Nishiyama, who would go on to make another RM classic, Kung Fu Master. And Moon Patrol is widely considered the first 2D game to feature parallax scrolling for its backgrounds. I first played this game in a Holiday Inn lobby while we were on vacation in the early 80s. Damn, remember when hotels actually had arcades? How cool was that? There were about 10 machines in there, but just none of them caught my attention quite like Moon Patrol did. Its gradual learning curve made playing it an absolute joy. Besides that, as a kid I ran into this arcade pretty often, and it was always a treat to blow my cash on this gem of a game. As the name suggests, you are a moon cop that patrols the surface of the moon, taking out bad guys and keeping those moon streets safe for everyone, as well as trying to survive the harsh natural hazards on the moon's surface. The basic gameplay involves driving along and blowing up spaceships, and generally trying to avoid death in all its forms, like pits of doom, landmines, random saucer attacks, avalanches, rock outcroppings of death until you get to the next checkpoint, where they'll attempt to throw even more stuff to kill you even quicker. You start off on the beginner's course, and if you make it through that, you'll go on to the championship course, which is a death fest filled with tanks, dodgy land speeders, and all other manner of murder. The graphics are really impressive for an 82 venture, as is the brilliant use of parallax scrolling in the backgrounds, with excellent animation and the physics of the buggy itself. Music is a real treat too, and even though it actually really only has one track, it's great and is a completely unforgettable tune. And like I said earlier, what I like the most about Moon Patrol is its accessibility and its slow ramping up of the difficulty. I mean, those arcades were simply made to steal your money. The cheaper and more difficult, and damn, there were a lot of those, the faster they made back their cash. But Moon Patrol ramped up nice and slow and actually gave you a chance to learn and enjoy the game before corpsing you in the championship course. The game turned out to be extremely popular and became one of the top 5 grossing arcades in 1982. It was also ported to every system under the sun, from the Atari 2600, the Commodore 64, and even dodgy 80s LCD handheld systems. I definitely recommend giving this game a shot if you haven't. It's simple to play and still every bit as fun as it was back in 1982. 1990, which has to be one of my favorite years for arcade releases. But before that, let's take a look at some of my pop culture highlights. Dick Tracy made its big splash on the big screen. The movie has a lot of flaws, but the way it managed to capture that 1930s comic book look so traditionally was just absolutely amazing and makes it totally worth a watch. That wacky family The Simpsons also made their debut. With its clever, witty sitcom humor, it was an instant hit. And started the ball rolling on the many Simpsons video games that were just around the corner. And what would a music entry in 1990 be without some trashy dance music in the form of Technotronic's Get Up Before the Night Is Over, bringing with it deep lyrics and a really thought-provoking music video. Well, not really, but damn is it catchy. And now let's jump on over to today's game, which is Moonwalker, released by Sega in 1990 for the arcades. Moonwalker was based on the 1988 Michael Jackson movie that is equal parts documentary, music video, and traditional movie. It's pretty strange to say the least, but the game itself is based on the Smooth Criminal and third act of the movie alone. It was made on Sega's System 18 arcade board, which had enjoyed massive success earlier with Golden Axe and Alien Storm. It should also be noted that there are 3 distinctly different versions of this game. This isometric arcade version, Sega's other version on the Mega Drive/Genesis, and US Gold's home computer versions. This one is an isometric run-and-gun/beat-em-up combo that has you as Michael trying to save a bunch of kids that have been kidnapped by a gangster named Mr. Big. Your main attacks are a lightning punch and charging magic blasts as you search the levels, killing gangsters and saving all the kids. Just like most classic arcades, you also have an awesome screen killer move or magic dance. And no, not that magic dance. But this one causes all the criminals to dance a choreographed Michael Jackson number before dying horribly, and this move was also used to great effect in the Mega Drive/Genesis version as well. Another fun addition is if you manage to find Bubbles, which was Michael Jackson's real-life chimp pet, he can transform you into a robot killing machine, where you have a limited amount of time to do as much destruction as humanly possible. The graphics in this game are quite excellent, with a massive attention to detail, not only in the well-designed stages, but in the brilliant animation of Jackson and all the characters. The music is obviously of special note as well, featuring many of Michael's greatest hits up until that point, including brilliant renditions of Billie Jean, Smooth Criminal and many more, that complement the game well and are used in the magic dance numbers to excellent effect. This game, unfortunately, just like Konami's Aliens arcade game, which I featured recently, has never been re-released in any other form. Most likely again over the million licensing issues needed to be signed to get this approved. And yet again, this is a huge shame, because not only is this an excellent, well-crafted run-and-gun style arcade game, but it's also a fascinating time capsule of Michael Jackson's career in the early 90s that I'm sure fans would love to see have a much wider audience. Fortunately, emulation exists, so fire up MAME or Emulation Station and give this one a go and relive another classic overlooked Sega gem. Today we jump back to 1985, where a 10-year-old me got to experience some all-time classic arcade releases like Green Beret, Hang On, Ya Kung Fu and Commando, and ended up buying all those games for my Commodore 64. The John Hughes classic movie The Breakfast Club was released, which taught me the most useful phrase when speaking to a teacher:
eat my shorts.
The Chinese government, in their infinite wisdom, decided to ban the movie Back to the Future because of its use of time travel was seen as a disrespectful portrayal of history. I kid you not, that actually happened. And my favorite song of 1985 was a-ha's Take On Me, which is not only a rocking song, but a super cool music video as well. But now let's jump on over to today's game, which is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, released by Atari in the arcade. I remember first playing this game at a really dodgy beachfront arcade in Durban, South Africa. The weird thing is, I didn't actually see the game, but heard it from across a few rows of arcade machines. I was jamming out to Green Beret when I heard the indie theme music and beelined it over there immediately. It was amongst the first set of Atari arcades to use their new System 1 arcade board, and shared company with the likes of Marble Madness, Road Blasters, Roadrunner, and a few other Atari gems. It was also the first one to have real speech samples and sampled John Williams' music from the movie. Atari themselves were already veterans of the Lucasfilm conversion process, having made the complete original Star Wars trilogy for arcades. Temple of Doom, though, was going to require a completely different style. The movie was a swashbuckling, seat-of-your-pants roller coaster ride of action, which is actually where the initial idea for the game came from. Laserdisc arcades were all the rage at that time, and the team's first idea was to make it a Laserdisc game and focus solely on the minecart sequence from the movie. But they came to the conclusion it was just gonna be way too expensive to film it, so they switched it over to the new Atari System 1 board. Peter Lipson, who worked on classics like Blasteroids and Ramparts, headed up the project, and he said, "We had the script and we saw some of the film as it was in progress. It was obvious we needed to build the game around the whip. We wanted to include the minecarts too, and thus the game was born. Just like the movie, you have to rescue the captured kids who have been imprisoned in the mines by the Thuggee cult and forced to look for the remaining Shankara stones. The game has 4 distinct levels, all set pieces from the third act of the movie. We got the rescue the kids sequence, the minecart chase, stealing the Shankara stones, and finally the showdown with Molaram on the rope bridge."
Molaram, prepare to meet Kali in hell.
The flow of the game is you repeat the first 3 levels 3 times. Then on the 4th go, the Shankara level is replaced with the rope bridge for the climactic ending. One of my favorite aspects is the choice at the beginning of the game's difficulty. Arcade games just generally didn't do this, as they wanted you to die as much as possible to pump in more credits. But not only was it a cool addition, but each level of difficulty just added more detail and aspects to the game, so it actually rewarded you for getting better. I thought this was a cool idea, especially for an arcade game. The game, just like the movie, is fast paced, and you gotta keep moving or you'll die. Each level plays a bit differently, which keeps the gameplay interesting. I always thought the graphics were really top notch and has that high-res System 1 look that still looks very impressive, even now. And of course the sound, which really made this stand out from other arcades at the time, with its abundance of speech samples and that pumping John Williams music just got you in the mood for adventure. And here's what Peter Lipson had to say about the end results. We were pretty happy with it. It might have been nice to include the plane crash as a skiing game, for example, but we had very tight constraints since the whole game had to fit on EEPROMs and they weren't cheap. I thought we captured the spirit of the movie quite well, and I agree. Overall, the game keeps that fast-paced, hanging on for your life feeling the third act of the movie is known for, and they did a really good job with it, and is a classic old arcade game that's well worth having a go at. So today we're going to jump back to the year 1991. The arcade scene was going from strength to strength, with cabinets getting bigger and better literally every day. On the big screen we had one of the best sequels ever made, Terminator 2.
Hasta la vista, baby.
And Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves had one of the most mental performances of the late Alan Rickman's career.
Cancel the kitchen scraps for lepers and orphans. No more merciful beheadings. And call off Christmas.
I was still playing my Commodore 64 and my new Japanese Famicom with all those crazy import games, as Sonic the Hedgehog made his debut, and I started hoarding my money for the inevitable Mega Drive purchase at Christmas that year. On a more serious note, notorious serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was finally caught after murdering 17 people and cannibalizing most of them, which led me and my high school friends on a not so serious note to make what has to be the most wildly inaccurate and amateurish serial killer movie ever made about Dahmer for a school project. It was called Apartment 211 and featured Dahmer with a South African accent.
Hi, I'm finally in contact with the apartment select. Yes, my name's Jeffrey Dahmer.
Really bad funky gore effects, and me as one of the worst hosts ever put on video. 1991 was such a blast. Which brings us to today's game, Nom 1975, released in 1990 by SNK for the Neo Geo MVS arcade and AES home system. This was the first Neo Geo game I'd ever seen or played, and by 1991 their multi-arcade cabinets were invading local establishments left, right and center. Even though it came out the previous year in Japan, the Neo Geo brand was now popping up all over, not just in arcades but in every gaming magazine I was reading at the time. I played this game at the same arcade I featured in episode 1, the base of Malvern Heights Apartments in Queensborough, South Africa. They rotated new games through that place pretty regularly, and the day I walked in to see Nom, they also had a full cabinet version of hard driving sitting right next to it, which everyone was drooling over. But as soon as I turned my head and saw that iconic splash screen, which was obviously Animal Mother from Full Metal Jacket, blasting away as the logo appeared, I beelined it straight for the cabinet, which was one of the multi-cabs.
Here I am, peoples, just hanging out at the factory where they make these Neo Geo multi-video systems. Now what these things are is that you can play 4 different games on this machine,
which also included Magician Lord and Baseball Stars, but Nom was the one for me. This game was a shooting gallery style blast fest that managed to combine all my favorite arcade games, Operation Wolf, Cable and Dynamite Duke, into a weird Vietnam War setting. To say this game is historically inaccurate is an understatement, but who cares, right? It's an arcade game after all, and all that matters is how much stuff you get to blow up. It featured 6 stages of relentless blasting action as you attempt to rescue a scientist and his daughter from some dodgy terrorist organization in Vietnam. This is one of the first arcade games that I can remember that actually attempts a real storyline, but due to the dodgy translation and the Resident Evil style voiceovers,
New operations have been wanted.
it just comes across as unintentionally funny in the best sense. The game scrolls left to right as you blast and dodge everything that's thrown at you. Grenades and flamethrowers are also available for pickup. As well, if you rescue the captured woman, they join you and help you out, which is a very cool inclusion. The game, however, is insanely difficult, and I can't even remember how much money I pumped into this thing back in the day. But playing it with a friend in the 2-player mode makes it slightly more possible. The combination of massive, bold graphics and cheeseball storyline, with its excellent, satisfying sound effects and crazy bosses, make this an arcade experience that I still look back on fondly. This game is fortunately available available on almost all modern gaming formats digitally, so being able to try it out for yourself is made pretty easy. So why not jump back and check out the roots of Neo Geo with one of the original arcade releases. 1986 saw musician Boy George be a guest star on one of the 80s most memorable TV shows, The A-Team. I kid you not. He played a character called Cowboy George. It's pure 80s gold, and the real reason why Hollywood cannot replicate these shows in reboot or movie form is simply because they were made by a bunch of whacked out 80s cocaine fueled producers that came up with this type of episode on their normal days.
We're the A-Team. Son of a gun.
So there.
And on the movie front, Hong Kong Bulletmeister director John Woo unleashed his film A Better Tomorrow and introduced an international audience to the coolness that is Chow Yun-Fat. Although I would highly recommend checking out the sequel, A Better Tomorrow 2, which features hands down one of the most insane end action scenes ever put to film, and nearly ended up blowing up star Chow Yun-Fat in the process. And on the music front, the Pet Shop Boys released one of their best albums called Please. When asked why the album was called that, they stated they wanted to see kids go into the record store and say, "I want the new Pet Shop Boys album, please." Cheeky Brits. And now let's jump on over to today's game, which is Zayn Selena was released by Technos in the arcades in 1986. It was a side-scrolling run-and-gun platform science fiction affair, with you playing the bounty hunter Zayn out to rid 5 planets of their bad guy overlords. The first time I played this was at a cafe in South Africa called Parkside Supply Store, which was just up the road from my school. After school on our way home on our BMXs, we would always stop by this place and have a few quick games of whatever arcades they had pushed into the dark corners that week. Zayn was one of the long line of gems I played there, which also included Karnov, Atomic Runner, and Choplifter. Zayn drew me in big time. I really loved the freedom you had to choose any planet you wanted to start with, and just from an arcade point of view, it was great because every time I played it, you could try out another level, and they were all drastically different in look and difficulty. You had a desert planet, jungle, water, rock, and volcano planets to blast your way through. Zayn was equipped with a nifty double jump and an array of weapons that could be picked off dead bad guys, such as a grenades combo, spread shot, and massive laser fire. Your goal on each planet is you blast your way through the scum, some crazy mid-bosses, and then facing off against the end of the level bad guy. Once defeated, you plant a bomb on their base and fly out of there as fast as possible, which leads to the ultra cool shoot 'em up stages as you flee the planet. These sections are pretty easy, but are a nice cool segue between the planets and gives a bit of variety to the gameplay, which is always fun. The graphics are small but very detailed, with a nice selection of enemies on all 5 planets. The gameplay is still pretty good, but the key to survival is knowing what's coming up to either avoid or blast. Fortunately, you have an energy system, so you can take a few hits before you die, which makes it far less annoying. The game suffers from the usual techno slowdown effect, which is in many of the arcade games, including their best known one, Double Dragon, but I honestly love it. I may be the only one which finds classic game slowdown to be charming, as I always felt they were pushing the hardware to the limits to produce the game. Although it could also mean they were just lame programmers, but I like to think the former. If this game looks familiar to you, but the name seems weird, you may know it as Solar Warrior, as it's known in the US arcades, or as Soldier of Light, which here is my original Commodore 64 version, and the name given to the European computer releases. Zayn Selena was the Japanese arcade name. Having said that, the Japanese version is still the best release in my opinion, as the US arcade version doesn't give you the option to choose the planets, which is a weird omission. Anyway, check this one out. It's a fun kind of forgotten techno gem that really doesn't get the respect it deserves. So let's jump way back to 1986, the year that gave us the Bangles' infectious hit song.
Walk like an Egyptian.
Whose music video nowadays would probably have some skinny jeans hipster shouting cultural insensitivity or some such nonsense. Back then it was just a cool video. There were so many great movies that year, which I'll touch on in future episodes, but the one that stands out was Crocodile Dundee. Good old Mick taught an 11-year-old me what a real knife looks like.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
And finally, on the TV front, my favorite short-lived show made its debut, called Sledgehammer, a ridiculous comedy about a cop who treats his gun like his wife, literally. It was mental, no wonder it got cancelled. But now let's go and have a look at today's game, the often overlooked 1986 Capcom classic, Speed Rumbler. I only ever encountered Speed Rumbler in one arcade, and that was one of the many beachfront arcades that dotted the city of Durban, South Africa. It was a triple-level arcade situated right next to a dodgy Greek restaurant called Mykonos, and it was awesome. Each arcade that dotted the city had certain games that the others never had. We used to catch a train into the big city and make our way through arcade after arcade on a Saturday afternoon, and maybe watch a movie in between. I remember seeing Speed Rumbler for the first time. It was situated about 2 cabinets down from 1942. As soon as I saw it was made by Capcom, I just slapped in some cash. The game is a mixture of driving with a bit of run and gun action. The story is a bunch of Mad Max type bad guys kidnap everyone from a small village, including the hero's wife and kids, and it's up to him to brave the Fury Road of the 6 stages to the Zappa's base for some payback and rescue as many people along the way. I just love the graphics in this game. They're so small but very intricate, and overall the attention to detail is exceptional. The gameplay boils down to trying to speed your way through each stage as fast as possible while rescuing as many of the townsfolk as you can. As you rescue them, they also provide much needed upgrades to your car, like speed and stronger guns, and also points and repair kits, so it's vital you save as many people as possible to keep going. Of course, you're getting constantly attacked by the Zappa gang, who are trying to run you off the road, busy setting up massive roadblocks, cannons everywhere, and all manner of death to derail your mission. The game is pretty tough, but like all good arcade games, with a little practice you can really master those levels. One of the best aspects of this game though is the ability to get out of your car and run and gun it on foot if needed. This simply blew me away as a kid. I just couldn't recall seeing any game before that do this. Essentially, if your car is about to explode, you can bail out and hopefully survive long enough to jump into your replacement car. It's such an intense but fun concept, and I know this seems unremarkable now, but back then it was pretty amazing, and we still had to wait about 11 years before the original GTA did this concept any justice. The game was overseen by 2 of Capcom's most influential creators, Tokuro Fujiwara, who was at Capcom from 1982 to 1996 and designed all their early arcade hits like Ghosts and Goblins, Commando, Strider, and even the original Resident Evil, to name but a few, and Yoshiki Okamoto, who gave us Final Fight and Street Fighter 2. This was just such a fun arcade experience at the time, and a bit of a forgotten Capcom gem I feel. It only got one port in 1987 to the Commodore 64, which is pretty decent but no conversion classic by any means. But if you want to play the original arcade version on newer systems, then check out the Capcom Arcade Cabinet compilation that came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3, which Speed Rumbler is just one of the many great games to try out. So let's go back to 1983, which was the year that gave us Return of the Jedi, the last flick in the original Star Wars trilogy. It's a trap! And let's be honest, the last good Star Wars movie. The band Kiss appeared on MTV for an interview without their trademark makeup.
After 10 years together, exclusively here on MTV this evening, we're going to see Kiss without their makeup for the very first time.
Their album sales were never quite the same, and the band Men at Work gave us the classic song Down Under, which introduced us to a Vegemite sandwich. I prefer my Marmite and toast, thank you very much. And now let's jump on over to today's game. Elevator Action was released in 1983 in the arcades by arcade heavyweight developer Taito. The game was everywhere at almost every arcade you went to, had at least one elevator action hiding in some little dark corner. It was extremely popular. The game was a platform-styled action game where you played as an agent infiltrating an enemy building with the objective of stealing some secret documents and then escaping. The game had 30 levels, or floors, to go through, each getting a bit more chaotic with every turn. You make your way down elevators looking for a red door, which is your target, and where the secret documents are, all the while shooting and avoiding the stooges in black trying to kill you. You have a gun with unlimited ammo to blast them or light fixtures and send everything into chaos. Once you acquire the document, you have to beeline it to the bottom of the level and escape by car before the next level starts. The gameplay seems simple, but it's very fluid and open to all kinds of awesome action, with ducking, jumping, and even getting crushed accidentally in those death trap elevators. The game's graphics are really good for a 1983 release, with sharp, well-defined animated characters and simple but very well thought out stages that set up the action extremely well. It's super satisfying firing off a stream of bullets before jumping on an elevator as some poor schmuck bad guy opens a door and inhales a whole row of bullets. The music only has one main track that repeats for the whole game, which is usually a pretty big issue, but it's such a fun little simple tune that you'll be humming it long after you finish playing the game. My fondest memory of playing it back in the day was when we took a vacation down the south coast of South Africa to a caravan park which had its own games room. Instead of beelining it for the beach, I hit up the mini arcade selection they had, just at the right time when the maintenance guy was emptying the arcade of money and checking all the buttons were still functioning. When he left though, he didn't close the elevator action arcade coin door all the way, so I opened it and mashed the wire that registered the coins, going in and maxed out the credits on the game. That was one super cool afternoon of elevator action, until some knock kid told the owner and he came and shut the door. Oh well, I got about 30 or so free credits, so it was literally the only time I ever left an arcade with change in my pockets. The game was ported to a lot of popular systems such as NES, MSX, and many others, but I don't feel like any of them really truly replicated the feel quite like that original arcade gem. The game eventually saw a sequel in 1994 called Elevator Action Returns, which was absolutely brilliant and is far less well known than this original classic. Check out my review for the excellent Sega Saturn port of this game for more info. I'd still suggest checking this game out only in its original arcade form if available, or through MAME for that original arcade feel. So let's jump back to 1987, which saw Nintendo team up with Mike Tyson for Punch-Out on the NES. Nintendo luckily signed Mike during his punchy phase of life. God knows what this game would look like if they teamed up with him during his cannibal or hobo pigeon stages.
How many pigeons you got? Maybe 1,400 now. Shit.
And on the cartoon front, Disney's DuckTales made its debut, and like any kid, I just loved it to death. Although I have to wonder what dark secret Launchpad has over Uncle Scrooge. I mean, for the thrifty money grubber he is, he seems to have no issue with McQuack crashing $1 million planes in every episode. I'm on to you, Uncle Scrooge. And on the movie front, Three Men and a Baby made its debut, and unless you grew up in the 80s, the cast would be completely alien to you, with the likes of Mahoney, Magnum PR, and that dude from Cheers. And on top of that, it was directed by Mr. Spock. No, not that dude, the OG Spock. Oh man, I'm starting to feel real old. And now let's jump on over to today's game, which is Operation Wolf, released by Taito in 1987. Back then, making that weekend pilgrimage to the big city to play the latest arcade games was like a ritual that just couldn't be broken. I played this gem in an arcade in Durban, South Africa, in a mall called The Workshop, a converted train station turned into a hipster-style retail outlet. The place had an amazing selection of games up on the second level, wall-to-wall classics, RoboCop, Outrun, Enduro Racer, the list is endless. Every time I went there, they had at least a dozen new games. It was arcade heaven. As soon as I spotted Operation Wolf for the first time, I beelined it for it immediately. It was a thing of teenage boys' dreams, a massive Uzi submachine gun strapped on top of an arcade, which let you live out your military hero dreams of mowing down thousands of bad guys, all the while rescuing hostages and becoming the hero you always wanted to be.
Operation Wolf.
The best part for me was that this machine was still regular price and wasn't pimped out for double quarters to play, so obviously this was gonna get some serious playtime. The game was the answer to virtually all the movies of the day, like Rambo 2, Commando, and Delta Force being the most obvious inspirations among others. Just like all the best arcade games, gameplay was as simple as it got. Go rescue a bunch of hostages. Kill everybody that gets in your way. This is without a doubt in my mind the best light gun style game ever made. It's just got a simple addictiveness combining the excellent metal feel of the gun, the massive detailed graphics, and some of the best sound effects in a game, just to make it as addictive as hell. There were 6 stages in total to blast your way through, everything from the jungles to a weapons depot, airports, etc, etc. Each one adding new enemies to the mix for you to massacre. The levels play out a bit differently than most games, requiring you to blast a set number of enemies before the stage ends, which actually gives you a chance to strategize a bit, knowing when to spray bullets, use rockets, or start making much more concentrated shots to save your ammo. Civilians are also running all over the place, so try to avoid them, as well as bonus items to discover, and the amount of hostages saved will determine if you get the good or bad ending.
Splendid! You are a real pro!
Which wasn't a very common thing, especially in arcade games. It was also as much fun to watch as it was to play, and the feel of that Uzi has never been replicated quite as well, besides the T2 arcade game, which had a similar feel and look. The game was followed by 3 sequels, each one becoming a little bit less interesting for me, although I did enjoy Operation Thunderbolt, the direct sequel, a lot, and that one is also well worth playing. With the gun aspect obviously missing, I found that the best way to experience this game now is through MAME. The controller is obviously no substitute for the real gun, but it still honestly plays really well and is a fun way to experience this classic if you never have. Its overall combination of detailed graphics, excellent chunky sound effects, and that Uzi controller make this an arcade gem I will never forget. With the new decade starting, the arcades were firing on all cylinders, plowing forth with Laserdisc releases.
One more important thing. Hey, you codger! Don't tell him a
The birth of the Neo Geo arcade cabinet, and the heavy hitters continuing their dominance over all their rivals. On the movie front, we got Die Hard 2, a movie whose plot revolves around John McClane again getting into another elaborate terrorist plot. I put logic aside and went for the ride. I mean, they couldn't possibly do this again, I thought.
Story of my life.
Musically, the infectious sounds of Wilson Phillips invaded the airwaves. So much so that my Iron Maiden cranking neighbor started playing Hold On from his balcony at max ghetto blasting sound every afternoon. Such is the power of early 90s pop. And on the TV front, we got The Flash, the original 1990 version, which gave us Mark Hamill as one of the most demented bad guys, the Trickster, in all his wacky glory. And now let's jump on over to today's game. Released in 1990 by Konami. This game came out right during my arcade gaming heyday. Those Saturday trips to the big city to play the latest games was a much loved ritual, and like many arcade games, I only ever came across Aliens once, and it was at the high class arcade, which is what we called it, cause you put money onto a credit card and then use that to activate the games. No more pockets full of quarters, therefore no more dodgy pickpockets. Arcades back then were filled with all kinds of weirdos, trust me. Aliens was based on the 1986 James Cameron classic movie. You know, the one where this happens.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
The game was a side-scrolling run-and-gun game, broken up with occasional on-rail shooting segments and massive boss fights everywhere. You had the choice of 2 characters, either Ripley or Hicks, the main characters from the movie, although Hicks was only available as player 2, or play together in the 2-player mode. The game had levels and areas from the movie, but also expands on everything from locations to new hybrids of aliens not seen in any of the films. As an avid Aliens fan, this was a massive treat of a game to come across, with its large, bold, pixelated graphics and smooth scrolling action. It really captured the style of the movie's most intense action sequences really well. Of course, your character has access to a whole range of awesome weaponry, from the standard pulse rifle to triple-shot lasers and triple-shot rocket launchers. And you even got to use the power loader forklift for some good old alien bashing action. The on-rail sequences of the armored personnel carrier are also a lot of fun. Just pure arcade shooting gallery sequences that help a bit with the monotony. Konami as an arcade developer were definitely on a roll during this 1989 to 91 period. With this, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Simpsons, and Sunset Riders all coming out during this period, making it one of their most creative times for the arcade division. It's a pity we never got to see an Alien 3 arcade in this style, but I guess the awesome Mega Drive version makes up for that. And you could also count Capcom's Aliens vs Predator as a spiritual sequel of sorts. Due to the usual licensing issues, no doubt, we've never got a home port of this game either. which is a real shame, although the microcomputers of the 80s got 3 different versions of Alien, which for the most part were pretty good, so we can't really complain that much. Overall, this is an awesome game to play. Great graphics and just simple gameplay, which is what arcades were all about.